That evening, everything seemed normal. A girl named Sarah and her boyfriend, Michael, decided to take a walk along a forest trail near a small town in Pennsylvania. The area was popular among locals. During the day, it was frequented by families with children, cyclists, and elderly people out for their daily jogs. But at night, the forest looked different. It was dark, almost soundless, and every branch breaking underfoot felt like a warning. According to Sarah, they hadn't planned a long walk. Michael suggested going outside for some fresh air after dinner to discuss their upcoming trip to his parents' house. They lived nearby, so they didn't bring phones or flashlights. They expected to return quickly. The route led along a familiar trail that led to the lake. Halfway through, the couple noticed someone moving behind them. At first, they thought it was another stroller, but the footsteps continued and seemed to be getting closer. Michael turned around, but couldn't make out the figure in the darkness. Sarah admitted feeling uneasy, but didn't say so out loud. Soon they heard a sharp sound, like something heavy hitting a tree. A moment later, a man jumped out of the darkness. His face was hidden by a hood, and in his hands he held an object that at the time looked to Sarah like a metal rod. Michael tried to push the attacker away, but the blow landed unexpectedly hard. From the very first moment, it was clear the attacker had acted with particular cruelty and cold-bloodedness. Sarah screamed, but her voice was lost in the forest. Michael had been hit several times on the head and shoulders. He fell, not even having time to pull the pocket knife he carried for hiking out his pocket. The girl tried to shield him with her body, but was struck in the arm. The metal object cut his skin, leaving a deep wound. According to Sarah, the attack lasted only a few minutes, but each moment felt like an eternity. After Michael stopped moving, the attacker turned on her. She received 2 more blows to the back and head, but managed to crawl into the bushes. Perhaps the attacker assumed she was dead, as he abandoned her and disappeared into the darkness. When Sarah came to, the forest was quiet again. Michael lay motionless, his face covered in blood. Attempts to wake him were futile. She realized she had to get out on her own. Despite the loss of blood, she managed to get up and make it to the road, where a passing car spotted her. An ambulance arrived within minutes. Sarah was taken to the nearest hospital in serious condition, but Michael could not be saved. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Police quickly cordoned off the area. The first thing that struck investigators was the nature of the wounds. They didn't match stab or gunshot wounds. Experts suggested the murder weapon could have been a heavy metal crowbar or a piece of pipe. Such a weapon indicated particular brutality. The blows were inflicted with tremendous force, leaving the victims with no chance to defend themselves. Within the first hours after the incident, the case generated widespread attention. A nighttime attack on a couple in love seemed impossible for a small and relatively quiet town. Local residents learned of the incident before dawn. Rumors spread quickly, and photographs taken by journalists from the scene of the tragedy fueled panic. Investigators began examining the area. They found evidence of a struggle, bloodstains, and shoe prints leading toward an old country road. It was also determined that the attacker had acted deliberately. The blows struck vital areas, suggesting a premeditated murder. Sarah, in the hospital, gave her first testimony. Her words were confused, but they already revealed an important detail. She insisted that the attacker hadn't said a word. No threats, no shouts, only blows. This struck investigators as odd, as most attacks involved at least an attempt to intimidate the victim. By morning, police had officially declared the case a murder and attempted murder. A search for suspect had begun. In the first hours after the tragedy, the investigative team faced a challenging task. The area around the forest trail was cordoned off, and forensic experts, patrols, and canine units were dispatched. The primary goal was to find as much evidence as possible before rain or local traffic destroyed any traces. The first object of attention was Michael's body. Forensic experts documented multiple head and chest injuries. The nature of the injuries immediately revealed that these were not stab wounds, strangulation, or firearms. All the blows were inflicted with a blunt, heavy object. The injuries varied in depth, indicating both randomness and the attacker's exceptional strength. A single blow would have been enough to incapacitate the victim, but the attacker continued to strike until he finally lost consciousness. The murder weapon was not found at the scene. Police officers thoroughly searched the surrounding area, inspecting ditches, bushes, and a lakeshore, but no metal objects or other potential weapons were discovered. This led to the initial theory. The killer took the weapon with him to cover his tracks. Despite her grave condition, Sarah was able to give her first statement the following morning. She claimed she didn't see her attacker's face. A dark had completely covered his head, and there was no light in the forest. She remembered only details: his tall stature, broad shoulders, and the way he moved, brisk but confident. She insisted the attacker didn't utter a single word. Investigators carefully recorded this information. The lack of words or screams could indicate a premeditated crime, in which the attacker deliberately avoided any sounds to avoid leaving any identification clues. Meanwhile, forensic experts identified several shoe prints. Their dimensions were consistent with men's shoes, approximately size 44. The direction of the prints indicated that the perpetrator had fled along a dirt road leading toward some old garage buildings. Dogs were sent on the scent, but they lost it after several hundred meters, presumably because the perpetrator entered a car. Police immediately ruled out robbery as the primary motive. Michael's pockets were untouched. He had his wallet and wristwatch. Sarah's personal belongings were also intact. This suggested that the murder was personal or demonstrative in nature. At the same time, work began with the victim's circle. Michael was a final-year college student working part-time at a local supermarket. Sarah was a freshman and had no conflicts at university. According to their friends, the couple lived a normal life and had no serious enemies. However, one acquaintance reported that, a few days before the tragedy, Michael allegedly mentioned someone who was overly inquisitive about his personal life. This information was verified, but no concrete confirmation has yet been found. Local media actively reported on the incident. Journalists published photographs of the cordoned-off forest and commented on the unusual nature of the case. The attacker didn't use typical weapons, left no traces of robbery, and made no attempt to hide the body. Everything seemed as if his goal from the start was to inflict maximum harm on the victims. Investigators paid particular attention to the medical report. Forensic experts determined that the nature of the injuries was entirely consistent with blows from a heavy metal pipe or crowbar. The presence of dents in the skull and broken ribs supported this theory. The experts emphasized that significant physical force was required to inflict such blows. Police began investigating criminal elements in the area. Of particular interest were several local residents previously convicted of assaults with metal objects. However, none of them were near the forest at the time of the crime. Witnesses confirmed their alibis. The second focus was studying the escape routes. Investigators requested footage from surveillance cameras installed along the country road and at nearby intersections. One camera captured a dark SUV driving by around 2 a.m. that night. However, the image was too blurry to identify the license plate. Sarah continued treatment, and her condition remained serious. Her testimony remained the primary source of information, but each interrogation was interrupted by her fatigue and pain shock. Investigators were careful to exercise caution. Any pressure could lead to the loss of crucial details. By the end of the week, the investigation had pieced together a picture. An unknown man had attacked the couple, acted with particular brutality, used a heavy metal weapon, and fled the scene in a car. However, neither the motive nor the perpetrator's identity had yet been established. The investigation entered a new phase. After the first few days of searching for clues, police began a systematic review of Michael and Sarah's surroundings. Investigators assumed the attack was targeted and not random. The lack of evidence of foul play ruled out a random armed robbery. The police first turned their attention to the victim's personal connections. Michael was a college student and had many acquaintances. Some of them were aware of his fiery temper and several conflicts at the university. One professor reported that a month before the tragedy, Michael had gotten into an argument with a classmate over an IOU. The young man, Dan, demanded the money back, but Michael refused, claiming it was a gift, not a loan. Dan was summoned for questioning, but provided an alibi. He was at a bar with friends on the night of the murder, a fact confirmed by witnesses and security footage. Another lead came from Michael's family's neighbors. One of them reported seeing a young man near their home several weeks before the tragedy, apparently following the couple. This matched Sarah's description of someone showing an interest in their lives. However, no one was able to identify the observer. Sarah gradually regained her strength, and her new testimony added further details. She recalled that the attacker was left-handed. The blows came from the left side, which was evident in the trajectory of the movements. This significantly narrowed the search. The police investigated Sarah's previous relationships. Before Michael, she had dated a man named Kevin. Their breakup had been acrimonious. Kevin made no secret of his jealousy and had previously come to the police's attention for aggressive behavior. He was questioned first. Kevin denied involvement, claiming he was visiting relatives on the night of the attack. His alibi was verified. Indeed, he was out of town, which was confirmed by his family's testimony. Nevertheless, his name remained in the case file. Special attention was paid to local residents with criminal records. A man named Richard, previously convicted of assault with a metal pipe, lived in the area. He was investigated particularly thoroughly. His footprints were compared and his movements were traced, but no evidence of his involvement was found. Meanwhile, the first forensic results came in. Shoe prints found at the crime scene matched a model that was on sale for a limited time at a store in a nearby town. Police began checking the customers, but the list proved too broad to immediately identify a specific suspect. Public pressure mounted. Journalists demanded answers, and residents expressed dissatisfaction with the slow pace of the investigation. Investigators were forced to publicly announce that they were investigating more than 10 people, including acquaintances of the couple and individuals with criminal records. Despite a wide range of suspects, there was no direct evidence against anyone. Every alibi required verification, and the process dragged on. The investigation continued to speculate. Either the killer had ties to the couple's personal life, or it was an unknown individual who had decided to commit a spontaneous attack. By the middle of the second week of the investigation, the investigative team found itself in a situation where the number of leads being investigated was growing, but no concrete evidence was emerging. The main problem was the lack of a direct lead. The murder weapon had never been found, fingerprints had not been identified at the crime scene, and the shoe prints were too generic. Forensic experts focused on analyzing Sarah's clothing and belongings. Traces of Michael's blood and microscopic rust particles were found on her jacket. Experts hypothesized that the killer used a corroded metal object consistent with the initial theory of a pipe or crowbar. This information allowed them to identify the type of weapon, but did not provide any clues as to the identity of the perpetrator. Particular attention was paid to the route the attacker took to leave the crime scene. Surveillance cameras recorded a dark SUV appearing near a country road that same night. The vehicle disappeared from the footage for only a few seconds, but it became a key landmark. A check revealed that more than 30 similar vehicles were registered in the area. Each owner was called in for questioning, and their location on the night of the murder was verified. The investigation couldn't ignore public pressure. Newspapers and television channels published daily reports on the case, comparing it to high-profile attacks of previous years. Journalists wrote about a maniac with an iron bar, whipping up a climate of fear. Local residents demanded quick results from the police, fearing further attacks. At the same time, police were reviewing cases from previous years. 2 similar incidents were found in the archives. Both occurred in a neighboring county, where the victims were struck with heavy objects. However, those cases remained unsolved. A comparative analysis revealed similarities, but also significant differences. In the previous cases, the attacker stole items, while in this case, nothing was missing. Meanwhile, Sarah continued to give new testimony. She recalled smelling a distinctive odor during the attack, a mixture of oil and gasoline. Investigators linked this to the perpetrator's possible profession. The theory that he was a mechanic or construction worker was considered. The interrogation of suspects continued. Some were eliminated after alibis were verified, but others remained in view. Among them, a man named Thomas, previously convicted of hooliganism, stood out. He matched the description: tall, broad-shouldered, and left-handed. His car matched the model captured on camera. However, there was no direct evidence against him. Shoe forensics failed, and witnesses claimed he was at home. The investigation was increasingly faced with a lack of information. Each new circumstance raised even more questions. Profiling specialists were brought in to investigate these leads. Psychologists noted that the attacker's behavior indicated a high level of aggression and possible personal motivation. They ruled out a random homeless person or drug addict. The perpetrator's actions were too focused and confident. At this point, investigators focused on the victim's circle of friends. It emerged that Michael had been involved in a dispute at a party a month before the tragedy, where he and two men had gotten into a fight. Their identities were established, and police began investigating their alibis. This line of inquiry could provide the missing motive. By the end of the month, the case was still open, but investigators were certain the perpetrator was within the couple's immediate social circle. All that remained was to gather enough evidence to bring him to justice. By early the following month, the investigation had focused on several suspects whose alibis were questionable. Chief among them remained Thomas, a man with a previous conviction for hooliganism who matched the description. His SUV was similar to the car captured on surveillance cameras, and neighbors claimed he left the house on the night of the murder, though Thomas himself denied it. Police searched his garage. Inside, they found blood-stained clothing and a rusty metal pipe wrapped in burlap. Initial tests indicated that the blood on the clothing belonged to an animal, but the results from the pipe were more concerning. Microfibers of tissue were found on the surface, matching samples recovered from Michael's clothing. Further investigations reinforced suspicions. Telephone records showed that Thomas's cell phone was located near a forest path on the night of the crime. He claimed his friend may have taken the phone, but there was no evidence to support this. Investigators re-interviewed Sarah. When shown photographs of a suspect, she couldn't confidently identify him, but noted that his figure and movements were similar to what she remembered. Despite her caution, investigators decided to charge Thomas. The arrest generated widespread publicity. The media immediately reported that the police had found the killer with a pipe, and the public took this as proven fact. But the defense insisted there was insufficient evidence and no direct witnesses. The trial promised to be difficult. At the trial, the results of forensic examinations were the primary evidence. Experts detailed matches between the marks on the pipe and the injuries on Michael's body. The court also considered the location of Thomas's phone and the testimony of neighbors who saw his car that night. The defense attempted to challenge the evidence, citing possible expert errors and police pressure. However, the combined evidence convinced the jury of the defendant's guilt. The verdict was handed down a few weeks later. Thomas was found guilty of Michael's murder and the attempted murder of Sarah. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Sarah attended the hearing but avoided commenting to the press. For her, the case was not only a tragedy but also a trial that left a deep mark. For the city, the trial marked the final conclusion to a case that had gripped the entire region for months. Residents welcomed the verdict as a vindication of justice, though many remained skeptical until the very end whether the true culprit had been found or whether the investigation had simply followed the most obvious path. The forest attack case ended with a verdict. The investigation recorded the facts, the jury reached its verdict, and the court imposed a sentence. The city returned to normal life, and the case materials remained in the archives as yet another recorded case of brutal murder.